Muy bien. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Es un placer estar aquí
It's a
con
pleasure to
vosotros y
be
con
here with
vosotras.
you.
Tengo una duda, no sé si
I
me
have
estáis
a
viendo o si
question. I
solamente
don't
estáis
know
viendo
if you are
el
all
cartel
able
de
to
fondo
see
de la
me,
invitación.
or are you just seeing the screen
Ahora estoy viendo
saver,
algo. Vale,
the
perfecto.
invitation
Es que mi
screen?
pantalla no lo reconocía. Bueno, como os decía, es un
So,
placer
as I was
estar
saying,
esta
it's a
tarde,
pleasure to
compartir
be
esta
here this
tarde con
afternoon
vosotros
and
en
share this
esta
afternoon with you
jornada de debate y conversación sobre
during this
cómo
conversation
actúa la
on
ciberinteligencia en los
how
procesos de digitalización. Como
cyberintelligence
sabéis, es
works
un
in
encuentro
digitalization
que
process.
se celebra en el marco
This
de un
is
proyecto
under
que es global.
the
Yo soy Cristina Manzano, directora
framework
de Global.
of
Está organizando desde hace unos meses en colaboración con la Embajada de Estados
overall
Unidos en
effort in
España,
collaboration with the
cuales
U.S.
quiero
Embassy
agradecer
in
el habernos
Spain,
invitado a participar en
and we
este
want to
proyecto
thank
y
the
con un
embassy for
conjunto de
having
universidades
invited us
públicas
to
de todo el país.
participate in this project,
interés del
and
proyecto,
this
el
is
objetivo
with
del proyecto
different
es involucraros
universities
a
throughout
vosotras y a
Spain.
vosotros, a la gente joven, en
We're
conocer mejor y
seeking
entender mejor cuáles son
to
los desafíos a la
understand better the
seguridad
different
en un
challenges
entorno cada
to
día más cambiante y cada día más nuevo.
security
Y como el
in
propio
this
título de la sesión de hoy
increasingly
implica,
newer world
cuestiones que muchas
that
veces no nos
we're
planteamos
seeing
como
take over. Many
ciudadanos y que, sin
times
embargo,
there are issues
tienen
that
una
we don't even
incidencia
think about
enorme
as
en
citizens,
nuestro
but they
día a
do
día.
impact our daily life.
Esta sesión, como
For this
sabéis,
session, as you know,
contamos con el
we
profesor Antonio
have
Skarmeta
Professor Antonio
del
Skarmeta
departamento
from
de
the
informática de la Universidad de
Department
Murcia
of
y aprovecho, por
Information
supuesto, para
Engineering
agradecer a Antonio
from the
y a la
University of
Universidad de Murcia también
Murcia,
su participación en
and we're
este
very happy to
proyecto.
have
Tenemos también
him
con
participating
nosotros a
in this
José María
project. We
Blanco
also have with
Navarro,
us
que
José
es
María Blanco
el
Navarro.
jefe de
He's
inteligencia
the
de Prosegur y
manager
además es
of intelligence
profesor
for
en la Universidad de
Prosegur,
Comillas, y
and
a
also a
Michael
professor at
DeBolt,
the
que
Comillas
trabaja en
University,
Intel
and Michael DeBolt,
471,
who
también en cuestiones de
works in
Os cuento
Intel
dos
471.
detalles de
He's the
la
Senior
sesión
Vice
de hoy
President
y
of
del
Intelligence.
proyecto. Lo que vamos a hacer en primer
What
lugar
we're
es
going to do
escuchar a nuestros
first
tres
is to
ponentes. Van a
listen to
hablar
our three
unos minutos
speakers.
cada uno,
They're
yo les
each
voy a
going to
hacer
speak
preguntas,
for
pero
several
después
minutes,
lo
and then there'll
interesante de
be
estas jornadas
questions
es que
and answers. But the
vosotros
most important
participéis, que compartáis con vuestros con los
thing
ponentes, con todos
is
nosotros,
to
cuáles son
pose your
vuestras
questions,
inquietudes, preguntas,
ask
dudas, en caso de
questions,
que
make your
queréis que
comments.
profundicen algo más. Y para eso os invito a que mandéis vuestras preguntas
And
a
I
través del
invite you
chat.
to send
Tenéis
us your
el icono
questions through the chat.
abajo. Bueno, también
You
sabéis
can
que yo
find
estoy
the
hablando en
icon.
español, pero
I'm
que
speaking in
la
Spanish,
sesión es
but
conjunta en
the
español y en inglés.
session
Tenéis
is
un
in
icono
both
de
Spanish and
interpretación
English,
para que
and there's
seleccionéis el idioma en el que
interpretation.
queréis
There's the
oír
interpretation
la
icon if you'd
sesión.
like to
Esto
hear
es para los que se han
the
conectado a
interpretation
través del enlace que hemos
for the
mandado
session,
desde
and this
Global.
is
Hay otra
for
serie
those
de
who are
personas que
connecting
están
through the
conectadas, pero que
link
están
that we
asistiendo a la
sent, but
sesión
there
vía
are others
streaming.
who are
Ellos no tendrán acceso a
connecting
la traducción,
through
pero bueno,
streaming,
yo
and
creo
they
que entre todos
won't
seguro
have
que
access
tenemos
to the
facilidad
interpretation.
de comprender lo que nos están contando.
But I'm sure we can all
Así
understand
que
what's
sobre todo os invito a eso,
being
a que
said.
participáis y a que vayáis mandando vuestras preguntas
Send
a
us your
través del chat, y
questions
luego yo os iré
through the
dando
chat,
paso
and
en la
I'll
segunda parte de la sesión.
have
También
them
quiero
dealt with in the
recordaros
second
que
part of the
este proyecto
session. I'd
tiene
like
dos
to
patas, este
remind you
debate y
that
también
this
un
project
concurso.
consists of
Un
this
concurso
discussion
al que,
and
por supuesto, os
a
invitamos a
competition.
participar,
It's
en el
we
que
invite
queremos
you
que
all
nos contéis lo que os ha
to
parecido más
participate,
interesante, vuestras
and we're
propuestas
asking you
para seguir
to
profundizando, etcétera.
submit
El premio
proposals.
del concurso
The
es un
prize
viaje a
is
Bruselas
a
para
trip
visitar
to
la sede
Brussels to
de la
visit
OTAN y otras
the
instituciones
NATO headquarters and other
relacionadas con la
institutions
seguridad. Y es un
related to
premio por
security.
universidad. Así que os animo a que
And
saquéis
it
un
goes
momentito
in its
para
university by
visitar
university,
estos
so I would
concursos. Bueno, no me quiero
encourage you
extender
to
más, le voy a dar
participate.
ya la palabra
I
a
won't
Antonio,
go.
de nuevo
I would
agradeciéndole a
like
la
to now
Universidad de
give the floor
Murcia y
to
a él en
Antonio
concreto su
Skarmeta.
colaboración
We want to
y
thank him for
empezamos.
his
Muchísimas
collaboration,
gracias.
and
Muchas gracias, Cristina.
go forward.
Bueno, en primer lugar, como
Thank
ya
you,
bien
Christina.
dicho,
First, as you
agradecer,
said, I'd like
en este
to
caso a la
thank,
embajada, ¿no?
in
por
this
esta
case, the
iniciativa,
embassy for
embajada de
this
Estados Unidos, por
initiative, the
esta
embassy of the
iniciativa,
United
que yo creo
States, and I
es muy interesante y
think
aparte
this
de
is a
que,
very
como bien has
interesting
dicho,
initiative,
tiene
as you
una
said.
ventaja de participar a través del premio que se puede conseguir
There's
con
also
la
an added
participación en el
incentive for participation through
decía
this
además que, bueno, como
competition.
bien has dicho,
And also, as you
gracias a
said,
la Facultad de Informática
thanks
y al
to the
vicedecano que está, de
Information
hecho,
Science
que lo hemos visto antes en
School of
los
Information
asistentes,
Science,
que se ha encargado de apoyarnos
and
en la
others
organización de
that have
esta
supported
sesión,
this the
convocando a los
organization of
alumnos y a
this
los distintos
session
de hecho,
by
desde
convening the students and communicating with the different sectors that would be interested in participating. So if you have questions, even malicious questions, these can be dealt with as part of the session. I'd also like to thank you, Cristina and Es Global, for having invited us to participate in this session. Let's begin then with the actual talk, the presentations between the different speakers. There are different aspects to deal with, and knowing what some of my colleagues are going to be dealing with, I thought I would deal with some more technological aspects, especially from the point of view of digitalization. Since I'm in an information science school and we're dealing with all of the different technologies, their impact on security is fundamental, and I think it's very important to highlight how this whole new process that's occurring with digitalization now is just the extension of the use of information technologies and communications technologies in an integrated way with the whole productive process. And specifically, the advent of new technological solutions, such as in this case, the Internet of Things, on the one hand, automation processes, and now what we have, 5G communication, and the increasing use of artificial intelligence. This is springing from this is affecting all of the sectors, and it's coming, it's a revolution that is germinating from all of the different sectors. And so more and more, there's more and more possibility for connection, exchange of data, to enable there to be different elements or aspects of the value chain to be interconnected, and all of this is new and enables us to transform all of these different sectors. These all have great benefits and are bringing about a revolution, but they also have a series of challenges involved. I wouldn't call them problems, but rather challenges which need to be met. One of these is obviously the impact on the security of systems, the possibility of connecting with greater possibilities of integrating systems. What arises is also the possibility of there's a possibility of new risks vis-a-vis systems and potential attacks. There's a need, therefore, to have greater control of systems, of ensuring appropriate design of systems, and taking into account security right from the beginning. One of the great problems is, as we all know, and this is something that's quite widespread, is that security aspects are often only dealt with at the end of the development process. Often they're not taken, the security aspects are not taken into account throughout the whole process of development. So there are many issues that need to be resolved, because this can affect the ability to be interconnected, and it generates uncertainties. There can be new ways of attack and new vulnerabilities of the system. There have been issues of attacks on plants, and for example, certain ministries were attacked and taken offline for 3 or 4 days, and when it affected the employment office and had people waiting a week to collect their benefits. So this can, and in this process, as I said before, an important element that has to do with the impact of the situation of interconnectivity. It's not only on security, but on a derivative of security, which is privacy. The effects having to do with the management of data, of information, has more and more of an impact, and this generates an issue that needs to be taken into account in design for solutions, so that it can be determined who gets the information and who is it for. And this is this has to be taken into account throughout the whole digitalization process. This is a critical point. In Europe, we have a legislation on data privacy, which is one of the most advanced in the world, and it seeks to facilitate control of data so that the third parties cannot use the information. As we were discussing earlier, or talking about earlier, in the process of the connection process between the different processes and systems, it's very important to consider the fact that connections are to exchange information. So it's the secularization of the value chain is not only a problem from a point of view of one entity, but the security of the system or of a sector is determined by the ability to have all of the agents involved in a sector know that the systems are reliable and they can trust them. So the weakest link is going to be the one that causes the problem. So this engenders more and more that companies have to deal with the problems having to do with cybersecurity, have to develop solutions that enable them to manage and identify risks or attacks that occur and share this information with the other elements in the system so that they can react as fast as possible. What happens is that when there's a cybersecurity attack, it's not just an attack that affects one part of the system, but normally, because of the interconnectivity, it can quickly propagate and affect all of the elements, and there must be mechanisms that can be rapidly resorted to take control of the situation. So this is a major challenge, to develop mechanisms so that there can be secure information exchange throughout the whole system, whether it be sectoral or otherwise, to mitigate potential repercussions of attack. And then just to close my remarks, another important aspect of technology right now is the use of artificial intelligence. As you know, it's a whole system of algorithms and technologies, but right now it has a major ability to enable us to deal with major amounts of data. It generates a lot of data, and to be able to analyze the data and detect patterns of attack or new ways new forms of attack or compromising the information or the connectivity is, so this is another additional tool that can support us, but it's a tool that the attacker, him or herself, can use to be part of the attack. So there are two sides of the coin. It's a tool, a supporting tool for defending the system, but also can be used against the system. So it's important also to be able to develop solutions, and that entities, processes in general are more and more able to understand the need to use this type of technology in their own benefit and to be able to use it to identify new forms of attack. So this is just what I wanted to discuss. There are challenges, not problems, but they have to be taken into account. Technology facilitates the use of new solutions for new scenarios. There is certainly underway a transformation of processes, but this technology itself, we have to be careful in designing systems, and we as engineers and system designers have to be cautious and protect the security of systems from the design phase right along to execution and the operation of systems, to make sure that any new attacks, we have a reaction and have developed the most intelligent reaction possible and be able to work as fast as possible against it. So this concludes my remarks for this first section. Thank you, Antonio. In these pandemic times, I couldn't help but compare you with epidemiologists. They're watching for attacks and how to deal with them. Perhaps later in the second part of our conversation, I'm going to want to ask you how you can anticipate, because there's reaction and prevention and anticipation, of course, and how can you do that? But that we'll deal with in the second part. I'm going to ask Michael to speak.
Michael.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, the floor is yours.
Hi, Mike DeBolt here, coming to you from sunny Texas. Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here talking with you all. Thanks for inviting me. I have to say that it's a little after 9 a.m. and I'm already done with my coffee. So we'll see how this goes. So thanks for having me again. I'm the Senior Vice President of Intelligence at a company called Intel 471. And I oversee a team of intelligence experts around the world, helping our clients ranging from really large multinational financial institutions to the aviation industry. We have big retail customers as well, and everything in between. My team helps protect them against cybercrime threats. And our main focus is tracking bad actors who are operating in what we call the cybercrime underground. You might also hear it called the dark web. We actually don't use that term, but that's a whole nother story. I actually wrote a blog on that a year or two ago. So if you're interested in why we don't like to use that term, feel free to go to our website and you can hear from me on that. But we're talking about financially motivated cyber criminals. That's who we track. These are bad actors who are operating in underground forums and instant messaging platforms, planning attacks, talking and collaborating how they're going to sell and operate malware that steals banking account information or personal information, talking about fraudulent schemes where they're stealing sensitive personal information and then using that to steal or create fraudulent identities, right? So, and there's much more to what we do, but those are the kind of people that we're tracking. My background is nearly 20 years in both the public and private sectors, most of it being in law enforcement and the military. I've been at Intel 471 for almost 4 years now. And just prior to coming to here, I was the United States representative and head of cyber intelligence at Interpol in Singapore, which was a pretty amazing experience. And previous to that, I was a special agent with NCIS, with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. We have a TV show called NCIS over here. I don't know if it's popular in Europe or in Spain, but that's not it. It's not the TV show. It's the actual real thing, which isn't as exciting as the TV show, unfortunately. But that's what I did. I was an NCIS agent, and I focused on cybercrime investigations and also national security operations to protect kind of our foreign adversaries who are looking after, trying to find our next blueprints for our submarines or our weaponry. So really trying to identify who those people are and those nation states who are going after our secrets against the Department of Defense. And then a long while ago, way back, I was a Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps Scout infantryman, and I did a couple of tours in Iraq in 2003 and 2004. I didn't do anything with technology. I was an infantryman, so I just kind of shot guns all day. So my main passion is definitely cybersecurity, but I fall into a niche within cybersecurity, which is cybercrime intelligence. And what that means is really identifying bad guys, becoming really intimately familiar with who they are, how they operate, knowing what their motivations are, what their capabilities are. Those are two different things: motivations, their intent, versus what they're actually capable of doing. And then turning that around and helping organizations stay informed, right? So they can help protect themselves against those adversaries, those bad guys. So when I think about kind of the topic at hand here, and our societies continue to become more and more digitally dependent, relying on the internet for everything that we do, I see this firsthand. We're going to continue to face new threats, new and sophisticated bad actors who are constantly on the prowl, always finding new and creative ways to go after our money, steal our sensitive information. And through my lens, the way that I look at this is that knowing your adversary is very, very important. And I think if there's anything that you can take away from me in this talk, is that. So how do you do that? Well, you have to understand where they operate, who they are, establish what we call coverage in the intel world, establish coverage over those places where they operate so that you can be in a position to view them. And really, that's it. We can, at that point, we can properly identify what we're up against and stay vigilant against all of their schemes. So I'll pause now and just say thanks again for having me. And I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Michael, you said life was not as the TV show, but it sounds pretty close to it. Sure. Chasing bad guys is not, it's not what we do in our daily life. So maybe you can tell us more about it and how you do it and how you identify these people and how you, or what kind of people are behind these attacks and so on.
Sure.
I'm going to move now to José María. Hemos tenido ya la visión desde
Now we've heard from the university.
Lo que Antonio nos ha presentado no
What
es un campo meramente teórico, desde luego. Ahora
Antonio
Michael nos ha contado también
and Michael
su experiencia desde la
told us
práctica,
about
y
his
tenemos a José
experience
María, que ha
in
estado en los
practice,
dos
and now
mundos, ¿no?
Jose
Está
Maria is in both of
lidiando
these
con la seguridad
areas,
en una
both
empresa,
academia and
transmitiéndoselo a una serie de estudiantes.
practice.
José María, ¿cuál es tu visión, tu primera
So,
visión
Jose
de
Maria, what's
de
your
todo
first
esto?
vision of this whole area?
En primer lugar, muchísimas gracias por la
First,
invitación.
thank you for the invitation.
Un placer ya contactar. Es un placer también volver a
Very,
contactar
it's also a pleasure
con la
to
Embajada de Estados
be able
Unidos,
to be in contact with the U.S.
María
Embassy.
Civil, dirigiendo el Centro de Análisis y Prospectiva. Y bueno, pues
And
confieso que sé mucho menos de ciber que
I must
mis
confess that
compañeros.
I know a
2
lot
años he
less
dirigido la
about cybercrime than my
Ciberinteligencia en Prosegur.
colleagues. I've been
Poco me voy a basar
working
en
in
he intentado aprender.
Prosegur
En
and
algunas cuestiones, ¿no?
as the manager of intelligence and prospectives. Before that, I was a civil guard, and there's a lot that has to do with very similar work in Prosegur. From the point of view, there's a famous saying that if you you have to know how things work, what it do, and see what the kind of attack that you're getting from the bad guys, how it's working, and analyze it. And if they're using information on internet and do a very dealing with the attack from the right and denying the attack right from the beginning, but and then ultimately, in many cases, the attacks come in because of somebody's carelessness, just a simple email or something. So people don't realize that they're in these social factors and psychological factors that they're being used by the criminals, and how a person can compromise a whole system or a whole network. Socially, we're changing. There's a great deal of loneliness in our societies, and having a lot of friends seems like it's something a good thing to do, but really you can't have 1 million friends conceptually. That's just not a thing you can do. So it gets socially, we're seeking the feeling of belonging. Nobody cares about my opinion, but I just vent my feelings on the internet. The consumer society, we have a dichotomy here of loneliness or solitude and individuality, individualism, the feeling of urgency. I can't go out shopping. Tomorrow's my daughter's birthday. I'm here in the office until 9 o'clock. I'll buy something on the internet and go to any platform. I'm just pending. I don't want to let my daughter down, and I'm just doing what I can. And within that whole thing, I get a mail that says that there's a problem with my package, DHL or something. So the temptation is to just click on that link in those but that could be the bad guy. This is all used by organized crime. There's a matter of authority. I just got a call from my boss and there are social factors and psychosocial factors. The immediacy. We've lost patience. We want everything right away. We just get it by pressing a button. When I had my Spectrum many years ago, we took us 10 minutes to wait for the game to download. But now we're just used to this dopamine, this the real high that we get from this responsiveness. We're in a society in which we all have our ego right on the line. We want to have an opinion, and that exposes us even more. I'm a famous millionaire soccer player, and I want to show off how well I live in my $1 million mansion. So all these the algorithms, it's not something that comes out of nothing. There are people behind those algorithms. They can help you make decisions, but we're very close to delegating our decisions to machines. It either brings into question the very existence of the human being. I saw a study that many people trust an algorithm more than a human being. Processes of disinformation, it's generated and through internet and social media, and it's breaking down the most important thing we have in society, which is our cohesiveness. The maker culture, because now we can make whatever we want without intermediaries. So now we have 3D printers making weapons in Spain. We're seeing a brutal change in that has a lot of connotations for security. Cyber intelligence, I think, is involved in all of this. It's not only technology, but it goes a little bit further. What are the modus operandi? What are the ideas behind? We have information, we analyze it, and then we think. And then we have all these media cycles that are distracting us from the important focal points. Whether they affect our company, our employees, our systems, our bottom line. And I'd like to make a call in this fight that we're all in. With all of its advantages, as Antonio said, we need a lot of support. And we don't only just need engineers. My cyber intelligence team has about 60% of people who are trained in security, in journalism, sociology. 40% were engineers. So I'd like to make a call out for people who are studying social sciences to become involved in this field of security. There are a lot of initiatives, but there are a lot of initiatives to be able to work in skilling. There are a lot of people in the university that are studying for jobs that aren't going to be existing anymore, but there are new jobs and new areas to look into. Perhaps we can. I was in a debate recently with Tornero, who's the president of the Spanish television, to see. We were saying, let's see if we can have some influence to try to get that we should have all work on this problem of cyber security and have it even dealt with in schools, so as a general education issue. So I'll give
Muchas
back the
gracias,
floor.
José María,
Thank you
por
very much.
introducir
Thank you,
también,
Jose Maria,
la
for
variable de
introducing
cuáles son los
the
perfiles.
variable
Luego
of the
vamos a hablar más de ello,
profiles,
pero también de uno de los
and
aspectos
also
que
one of the
buscamos,
aspects that we
con este proyecto, y es que
are
cada uno de
seeking with
nosotros se
this
dé cuenta
project,
de
that
cómo
each one of you
somos actores también
realize that you
esta
are all
nueva era de
actors
seguridad, ¿no?
in this new
Entendida en su
era
sentido más
of
amplio, que antes
security.
parecía que la seguridad
Before, it
estaba,
seemed like, well, security was in the
limitada
hands
al
of
ejército y a
of
las
the
fuerzas de seguridad, la policía, la
military
Guardia
or
Civil,
the
etcétera, pero ahora
security
todos
forces,
nosotros
law
tenemos también
enforcement,
un
but
papel que
now
desempeñar ahí.
we all have a role
Habéis
to
pasado
play.
además desde la parte más
You've also
técnica de lo que
gone
son los
from the more
desarrollos técnicos hasta
technical
la parte más
areas
psicológica.
to
Hemos
the
hecho, yo
more
creo que un repaso
psychological
muy
area,
interesante a
psychosocial
todas
area.
estas cuestiones, y
And
si
I
me
think these are
permitís
all
voy a
aspects that are very interesting
lanzaros
in
algunas
dealing with this
preguntas para
subject.
poder seguir
And
profundizando.
I'd like to ask
Antonio,
some
como
further
hablábamos al
questions.
principio,
Antonio, as we spoke
has
at the
hablado
beginning,
de cómo
you
en
spoke
los
about
desarrollos
how
tecnológicos hay que
in
concebir la seguridad
technological
como uno
development
de
you
los
have to
pilares
consider
iniciales, ¿no? Y yo te preguntaba, ¿cómo
security
una
as one
cosa
of the initial
preparar los
pillars?
sistemas para
How
la
do you
seguridad ante
prepare
las amenazas que
systems
conocemos?
for
Y
security
te preguntaba, ¿y cómo es
vis-a-vis the
posible
threats that we are
prepararlos de las
aware
que
of,
no
and how can
conocemos?
they
Porque
be
otra de
prepared
las
for the
características
threats
de
that we
nuestros
are
tiempos
not
es esta
aware of
velocidad
yet?
continua de cambio en todos los
Because
sentidos.
there's a
Tú has hablado de la inteligencia
continual
artificial,
change
pero
in all
eso que es
respects.
una forma de
So
gestionar
this
los
is,
datos, también se
there's a way
tiene
to
al otro
manage
lado, por ejemplo,
data,
la de las
but
propias infraestructuras, ¿no?
we
El
have to
5G.
look at
Y ahí
infrastructures
jugamos con variables muy diferentes.
themselves,
Entonces quería eso,
5G,
que
for
nos contara
example. So I'd
cómo
like to
trabajáis
ask you,
desde
how
la
do you
propia
work
concepción
from the
antes del
very
desarrollo, claro, de los
concept
sistemas de
before
seguridad cuando no
development
conocemos
of security systems when you don't know the actual threats? Yes, what you just discussed is key right now, being able to develop systems that are adaptable or adaptive, so, and that can meet the challenge of new developments that is fundamental, and this is being shown in this whole process that we're involved in digitalization, in cybersecurity. There are several proposals out there in this regard. One of the areas that is being dealt with a lot right now is developing intelligence. I don't like to use the word intelligence. Actually, we should be talking about smart. Let's try to be smarter, make our systems smarter, so that we can be able to, on the one hand, from the risks and threats that we already know, be able to deal with these in different ways, but also the adaptive side of things is to provide the systems with the ability, with the capacity, so that to meet challenges that were not foreseen, or have ways that can involve certain components. It could be databases or something, so that they can identify. It's also, this underlines the importance of communication. So somebody may have seen the situation already, so that they can insert into the system the way to deal with it, and there has to be a way to update continually. It can be software or a sensor, depending on the case, but there has to be an ability throughout the life cycles, so that starting with the original design, you can design a solution to cover known risks and dangers, but also to be able to adapt to unknown dangers that may arise, and be able to attack and block it, and deal with it, and to be able to quickly recover the system. Ultimately,
todos estos componentes, todos estos sistemas,
we have so many components and systems and programs. Basically, it's rather than being something static, it becomes almost like a living being that is developing at all times. In many cases, it may be fundamental, it will be fundamental to have communication. And so we have to do away, there has to be compartmentalization so that when an attack is detected in the system, there can be a way of keeping it isolated so that options can be used and it doesn't take over the whole system. For example, a lot of things we do in structures is that there be components within the system, programs prepared that will take the measures to institute the security measure where there's been a potential security attack. The major change is the ability that systems have to be dynamic in their reactions, either in and of themselves or through components. And in this case, it's our job to adapt to these attacks and try to, and so it's key to use artificial intelligence in this, and sometimes we can use learning systems, machine learning systems, which will attempt to identify the issues, and if they are, to see if they're similar to what they've already seen, and if not, then to develop a solution. We're talking about advanced aspects, but this is where the trend of all of the what people are dealing with and focusing on right now in this area. There's a concept to have either learned processes or developing new processes within the very system. I understand from what you're saying is that the profiles that you're dealing with are technical people. I liked hearing from Jose Maria because more and more solutions have to be more and more multidisciplinary. There are some things that have to do with the technology, pure technology, but Jose Maria and Michael also in identifying risks or this, you have to, you need to have the psychology to understand the situations and how to react. And this is why a multidisciplinary team is very useful and it is very good. We work a lot with people, with lawyers, or they have to take into account issues involved with privacy, for example, and technologically we can solve them, but we have to take into account there are restrictions, legal restrictions involved, and so we need other people. Another project we're working on now, we have sociologists working with us to develop social security solutions. Means you have to take into account who's going to use them and to be able to understand how the person is going to react to a system or a situation of insecurity, such as is an attack, and not to try to give type of engineering training to somebody who's not an engineer, but to use mechanisms that can be more in line with the types of reactions that are necessary. So more and more, we're going to be seeing more and more multidisciplinary teams used to deal with all of these solutions as we go forward. Yes. My next question is for Michael. he told us about the different phases of his career as a continuum, but also how they're very different aspects. And I wanted to ask you, Michael,
would you look for if you need to hire someone today, or what kind of skills would you recommend to the students to acquire in order to become a cyber intelligence agent, or I don't know what's the best way to call it? What traits do you look for in people to help you to work with you and to develop all these new area?
Sure, great question. And actually, I want to just take a quick step back, because what you were saying, Antonio, I think is really, really important about having a security mindset from the very early on, both in terms of engineering, when you're engineering new systems and new software, but also from an intelligence perspective. So we're learning in the industry over the past 5, maybe 10 years, that it's no longer viable to wait for attacks to reach you. That's too late at that point. So then what do? Well, we go back to trying to identify actors who are targeting maybe the same industry vertical. So if I'm a bank, for instance, or a financial institution, I want to know who are the adversaries that are developing, we'll just say malware that's targeting banking account information. Well, it might not be targeting my bank right now, but I know eventually it will probably target my bank. So I don't want to ignore those things. I want to be very clear in my understanding of who those actors are. And as you said, Antonio, be very proactive and have that intelligence mindset about things that are probably going to impact me on the horizon, even though that they're not impacting me right now. So just wanted to mention that. It's really important to have that proactive mindset. And I really enjoy the discussion around multidisciplinary approach. And this is kind of answering your question, Christina. On my team, we have engineers, so people who have more of a technical focus that understand malware. We also have people on the team who have experience defending against that malware. So you're trying to develop a 360 view of what the actor is seeing, the perspective from the actor, the bad guy, and also the perspective of the defender. So you have this kind of 360 view within your team of how it can be used and how we can stop it, right? And then I think one thing that wasn't mentioned yet, which is reporting. So it's great that we have all of this wonderful information, we've collected it, we have all this intelligence about malware developers who may be impacting our organization in the future. We have all of that knowledge, we understand it, but then how do we articulate that and communicate that to the people who need to action it inside of our organization, right? So you need that, I guess I would call it a translation layer. You know, not all of the technical people are going to be able to communicate that in a way that is actionable. So what we've done, one of the things that we've done is we've brought on people with journalist backgrounds who have maybe communication degrees, who can help. They might not be the most technical people, but they work very, very closely with the technical people so that they can extract the most pertinent information that can then be communicated to a defender so they can take action on that information. And, you know, other than just skills and stuff you can learn in school, you know, those things I think are pretty straightforward. Technical experience, learning how to communicate, all those things that we learn in university. There's also the intangibles, right? I always look for people who are very curious, who are also very humble, because if you've been in this space for a year, 2 years, you realize that you're never ever going to get to the pinnacle of knowing everything there is to know in our field. So you have to come into it with a sense of humility. And really, once you graduate university and you get into this field, it's not the end. It is the beginning of learning new things. So you always have to come into it learning new things, because the reality is that we like to talk about artificial intelligence. We like to talk about AI, and those things are really important. But at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people behind a keyboard. We're still dealing with the human element. And so I really like, I think it was Jose Maria talked about the social sciences, bringing in people who understand the human element. That's really, really important. And so these adversaries are going to be creative. They're going to continue to find, it's like a chess game, right? We move this way, adversary moves this way, and it's just never ending. And they're financially motivated in a lot of cases. So there's always going to be a motivation there. And so our job as defenders is to try to stay on top of that. And the only way we stay on top of that is to try to be as creative and hopefully more creative than our adversaries. And that takes some humility. That takes some humility and drive and enthusiasm. So those are the kind of the things that I would look for, and the things that I've seen successful throughout my career as we try to, as I like to say, hit bad guys with sticks.
Thank you, Michael. Let me ask you something. Would you hire a hacker? Because that's, in some companies, that's been very much in fashion, you know, to if you cannot, well, just join them in, you know, and you talked about this mindset of taking the mindset of defenders and attackers. And would you hire a hacker?
So I would not hire anybody that is actively conducting malicious attacks. There's no room for that. I think we're at a point in our industry, you know, maybe that would have been okay like 10 years ago, because the candidate pool was smaller. And so we were kind of taking risks at that point in the industry. But we're at a point right now that I can get as equally qualified candidate who has been through the university, who has the requisite skills and the background and the experience, or even people who are just coming out of university with no experience whatsoever, who have maybe done their own side projects, but has showed me the skills and the promise without, you know, actually breaking into networks and stealing things. So that's the long answer to, maybe the short answer is no, I would not hire a hacker who is conducting malicious activity, but the mindset is what I'm looking for, right? Curiosity, humility, creativity, enthusiasm.
Thank you. Ahora también enlaza en parte con esto y con cosas que
and this links with this issue too. And you were saying that, like Jose Maria was saying, that you might receive an email that you really shouldn't be responding to, just an individual case. And we're seeing changes in our society. And now we're going through the pandemic, and there has been accelerated a lot of digitalization processes. We've seen it in education, teleworking, and so these are new challenges. How can security of a company be managed when part of the employees are doing teleworking? So how is COVID affecting the changes in the perceptions of cybersecurity? From your experience, and what is being done to fight these new realities that have been accelerated through the pandemic. This is for Jose Maria. The pandemic isn't going to be absolute change, but we have to see the changes what challenges are going to be situational and are going to be permanent. Will we going out to bars anymore? Are we going to go back to the theater, and maybe things are changing. So now this has brought us to make our home our shell. We're in our home, and this is our safest environment. And we used to get to know our neighbors even, and so we feel that this is the safest we can be. It's my office, it's my leisure time, it's where I do my shopping, my gym. I do everything online. It affects everything. We're sharing space with a lot of different functions. And also, this multiplies the attack vectors. So now I can't do a marathon, but I'll do an app that has a virtual marathon, and then I'll use my own home address to insert the data and this and that, and it'll be like fantasy marathon. And so this is multiplying the potential ways of attack without requiring any great sophistication. And also from a point of view of not only ours, but the criminals, they're intelligent, they have measures, they have the best money launderers and everything else, because they can pay for that sort of services. Have you ever seen an actual bank robbery? When I was a child, I saw some bank robberies in the flesh, but we're looking at enabled crime using technology. So, now, when in school, when you were a kid, you might be bullied at school, but when you got home, you were okay. Now you've got bullying all through internet, and you can never be free of it. Ransomware and malware. In companies, we're seeing an increase in different areas, but independent crime. And also cyber-enabled crime, the typical con game. There's a very classical analysis, and you might be looking at fraud taking place in coffee capsules, Nespresso capsules. So, and you might not be worried about a fraud, but just for people not getting sick. And in real estate, we're looking at fraud taking place in occupancy, and there's a lot of different technologies involved. So at a corporate level, we're seeing these different facets increasing a great deal, and solutions, the classic solutions that would eliminate a whole lot of percentage of activities, safe security copies, defense against phishing. We have a human factor and a technological factor, but the solution, we have a very evolved society due to science and technology, and it's just enough to issue an alert to say, be very careful before you click on this certain link. These are measures that need to be taken. We have a few people who have asked questions. I'm going to give the floor to both of them, one and then the other, and then you can answer together, and then if we have more questions, we'll do another round. So without any further ado, I'll give the floor to Alejandro Cano, who asked to ask his question. Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for this initiative, both Es Global and the U.S. Embassy. It's very inspiring. And I'm going directly to the question with regard to what Antonio was talking about. And I'm doing a master in artificial intelligence and how I can prevent this type of attack. It's true that we've seen development, continued development in a very changing. So LDR, the SOAR, etc., it has to do with intellectual, artificial intelligence. Are we going to be seeing development LDR to create structures for individuals, and on a business level, how can this affect the conventional management or surveillance scheme for a company? And if these measures that are in place, or these can be improved. Another question is, I was noting that you weren't talking about the human factor, and I was very happy to hear Jose Maria comment on that, because the technicians always talk about the technical aspects, and the human factor is very important. In this case, how can we improve the human factor beyond the general training of the classical user? Because there's research being done into studying anomalies of the user, etc. Would this affect the capabilities of the user? How can we apply this without invading the privacy? And last question for Michael. This is the dark web is seeming to be a growing business. It seems that there's an intrinsic privacy in the dark web and how it works. I'd like to know, in your experience, Michael, how can you most directly attack this problem? What mechanism would be good? Can the good guys use to keep track of the bad guys in the dark web? Thank you, Alejandro. Michael will also answer this question later on, but I'd like to see the entry into the web, and I'm going to give the floor to Sara for another question. First, this discussion is very interesting. From the technological to the human element. One subject that was discussed principally is the technical area. is the fact that to resolve cybersecurity problems, it's important to share information on the attack that's taking place so that different components can adapt and try to resolve the attack or mitigate the consequences as soon as possible. Sharing the information is great, but it would also be important to share the attacks being suffered by one company with other similar companies to be able and how they resolved it. This information, I think, is very relevant in the inter-European regulation, the Cybersecurity Act. One of the pillars is information sharing, but I don't know to what extent it's going to be possible to share the information, to manage the sharing of information from a technical and a human standpoint. Companies don't usually want to share information about having suffered an attack and I was vulnerable, etc., etc. So it's a trade-off between the common benefit that would ensue and my own reputation as a company. So how do you see this solution? What could be a solution to this problem? Thank you for the question. I'm going to give the floor to Antonio, Michael, and Jose Maria to discuss these first questions. Antonio, yes, well, welcome to the Cybersecurity Club. It's very active here in the university. And specifically, vis-a-vis this question, and not to get too belabored, I would look at dealing with these technological solutions in two major ways. One is incorporating improvements, adapting measures to the new factors arising. It doesn't mean introducing artificial intelligence necessarily, but it can be. More and more we're seeing they're looking to improve structuring of how to manage information and information gathering and storage. That's one line of work. There's a lot of work that's been very relevant in that area, in the ongoing. CM are incorporating solutions of the dynamization mechanics and learning based on prior experience and prior actions taken. So identifying reactions to my mitigation, and can this lead us to take new decisions, and whether there's room for adaptive techniques, etc. So I think there's a clear line along which to work. And there's another aspect that along the lines of the question asked by Alejandro Cano and has to do with what Sara was asking. It's more and more sectorial. We've talking about kind of an upset. There are different federations and then sectorial tools. So tools have. So what you achieve is the sharing of the information within a group or a sector, which is very specialized and very specific, having to do with attacks in the financial area, energy, for example. And then at the same time, to the federation level, it can also take care of the communications between sectors. So it kind of replicates the interconnectivity model, but it goes from the more specialized to the more general. And then with regard to what Sara mentioned, I also liked when Jose Maria said that when they had the attack, the first thing they did was let it be known and tell everybody else about it. And they weren't concerned about looking self-image or bad press. But in the project that we're involved in the financial sector, often it's not it's not a matter of the desire to share the information, but the legislative aspect. Sometimes you can't share the information because there's specific legislation that limits the ability to share the information. So in this development that I was discussing before, what we're discussing now is the fact that actual data, raw data is not being shared, but rather information, patterns, and so what you get more analyzed data, not just raw data, but without revealing information that might be sensitive for a company or a matter of privacy for a user. So this type of model is very much in line with what will be the development of this, and will also enable us to have responses and be more prepared to new forms of attack. So it's not a matter of giving all the information, which can be dangerous. And you may be giving information to just the wrong people. I would like to give the floor to Jose Maria, because there was a question directed to him from Sara about sharing information. I'm going to be specific with regard to information sharing based on corporate experience. It's true that perhaps years ago, if something happened to a competitor of yours, you might be happy about it. It would be an advantage. But in cyber security, we don't see it that way. Any company, all companies are well aware that they're going to be attacked. We just don't know when, to what extent, and how. So this has changed completely. Whether we're transparent or whether we're opaque, do we communicate this or do it immediately? But we also know of many cases where we've seen people we know very well, or companies that have gone through a cyber attack, but they haven't said anything about it. And immediately we communicated this to the pertinent authorities, they see it, and also our customers, our suppliers. If it affects you, you're compromising all of your suppliers and your customers, your clients. In commitment indicators, or when we found the actual bug in the equipment, even with companies, we communicated this to companies even in the same sector, to the Civil Guard, and the Civil Guard was in contact with FBI, and European institutions, because there are translational groups involved in this with a lot of opacity. Sometimes we don't know if they're from Ukraine, Korea, China. And so, yes, we're sharing more and more very naturally. One question is, another very sensitive question is whether you pay a ransom, such as with ransomware. And as Alejandro said about human factor, along the lines of what Antonio also said, in principle, the basis is that awareness and information, and it's important to deal with the human element, and we have to adapt language, change habits. It's more analysts. I'm sorry, because the sound is coming and going, so that's why it's getting a little jagged for this speaker. So having an approach to understand the word of people and the societies, to come closer to the technologies, to seek a midpoint. There was work by Mori on these complex systems, and we have, it's like as if we only see what we're focusing on, but we don't see everything else. So we have to look at it all, take it all in. And then you can use all the human support and technological support. Thank you.
And about all the other questions that had been raised.
Yeah, there was a lot to that. I actually had some notes here about the very good question of information sharing, and I actually, everything that Jose Maria said, I agree with. So I'm not going to belabor that. Maybe just to emphasize the point that was already made, which is that this is happening, right? I think corporations and government entities need to foster an environment of information sharing to remove it's still a badge of shame in a lot of countries whenever they're faced with a decision to notify the rest of the world or to notify their partners that they've been breached, for instance. It's still just considered this badge of shame. In reality, this is happening all the time. So I just got a notification that my earbuds are failing me. So raise your hand if you can't hear me any longer. But let me just quickly touch on the dark web question. That was a really good one around how do we disrupt it? And part of me says, well, if you can figure that out, then come work for me. But on a more serious note, and it kind of ties into the first question, which is, as long as actors have motivation, we're not going to rid the world of cybercrime, right? As long as there is money to get, it is always going to exist. And that means that these illicit forums are always going to exist. Actors are always going to communicate and plan attacks. It's always going to happen. So how to disrupt it? Again, it's about knowing where they operate, having an acute familiarization of how the marketplace operates. We view the cybercrime underground or the dark web through a business lens. It's a structured, organized system that's interoperable with one another. You have buyers and sellers. Some of these sellers and suppliers rival that of, their marketing programs rival that of some of the best Fortune 500 companies out there. They have brand name recognition. So it's about identifying the key enablers to cybercrime. So one of the key enablers to cybercrime is you have what we call hosting providers, and their job, they're criminals, and their job in the marketplace is to provide servers and infrastructure to sell and to lease out to other actors who then use that infrastructure to push out malware, or to send spam campaigns, or to send phishing attacks, right? So we always try to find, we call it going upstream. So try to find those key enablers. If you're able to identify how they work, the infrastructure providers, these server providers, identify how they operate and try to disrupt them. Then there's a cascading effect that happens. If you can disrupt the key enablers, then it makes things a little bit more difficult. And that's really the goal. You can make things a little bit more difficult for the actors. You can do it by identifying maybe some signatures. Whenever you see this on your attack surface, okay, we know we need to block that because that's a bad IP address, right? That's a very simple example. But you can also do it through law enforcement action. So looking to work with law enforcement to go and apprehend an actor. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen as often as we like. I will say that within the last 5 years or so, it's happened more and more. So, and that indicates there is better collaboration and cooperation with international law enforcement than we've really ever seen before in cybercrime, which is really promising. So that's it. It's really about knowing who the actors are, and then finding their pain points and disrupting them where they are. We're never going to get rid of it 100%.
Thank you. Hemos llegado al final del tiempo que teníamos previsto, pero tenemos más preguntas y...
Thank you. We've reached the end of our time that we had planned, but we have more questions. I just want you to know that we're going to be continuing to deal with some of these questions. I'm going to give the floor to Juan José. Thank you.
Como has saltado todo el tema
As you talked about the subject of the knowledge-based society, it's important to have knowledge of security. I was thinking that we're talking a lot about cybercrime, between companies and people, bad guys, but my question will be is what's going to be the future of cybersecurity vis-a-vis countries, since the human being has always had conflicts between companies, between individuals, and perhaps some of these attackers might have political motivation rather than just malicious. They might be politically motivated or ideologically motivated. The conflicts between countries are going to be more and more focused on technological matters rather than traditional conflicts, and this can affect the general population, which might be more vulnerable to this type of attacks. And this is just a general question I'm asking of all of the speakers. I'm going to give the floor now to Alberto Garcia. Thank you very much. Thank you to the speakers and S Global for the opportunity. My question is, as Jose Maria said, the subject of the studies that are needed for something that's going to be obsolete in the future, but can you think of something that in the future will be different branches in university studies to kind of make a dual course of study between technical computer science and law, for example, or social science? Could you foresee that becoming a possibility?
And in this case,
thank you for your question.
First to Michael, because regarding the first question, your country and our country has suffered those kinds of attacks, but just recently the president of the United States decided to impose sanctions on Russia because he said that is something unacceptable. We cannot accept that foreign countries interfere in our businesses, in our political processes, and so on. And I just wanted you to comment on that, and then the rest, of course.
Sure. Well, thankfully, I no longer work for the U.S. government, so I can be a little bit more free. However, my main focus is Intel 471 is definitely on the cybercrime aspect. So really, my comments should be taken more from my personal stance and also my experience working in national security. What I can say is that, and I think there was a question about this earlier, which is around, the cyber attacks being used more and more for espionage purposes. And I think we can all kind of see the writing on the wall. It's going to continue to keep happening. The more and more we have interdependence on internet technologies and systems that are connected with one another, especially with our critical infrastructure. What nation states are looking to do and use cyber warfare for is to level the playing field for kinetic warfare. So where there is a perception that there might not be a fairness or the playing field is level in terms of kinetic traditional warfare, cyber warfare would and potentially could be used to level the playing field. So if you were to take down a power grid of an adversary, of an adversarial foreign country, for instance, imagine what that would do to disrupt the ability for that nation to respond kinetically or otherwise. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting challenge, especially for everyone here on the call who is entering into this field. It's going to be an interesting another 10, 20 years as we encounter new and sophisticated attacks that are not just financially motivated or after sensitive information. It's about espionage and trying to level the playing field.
Thank you. José María, había una pregunta específicamente también dirigida para ti y para el tipo de estudios que podemos esperar en el futuro.
Sí.
Okay, José
Bueno,
María,
sobre
the
también lo
question
de
on the different types of
en el futuro,
studies.
eso está ya, ¿no? Antes cualquier conflicto entre estados se dirimía en el campo de batalla, un conflicto bélico tradicional.
Just referring to this last question,
diplomacia y otro que es el conflicto armado, tenemos un
we
montón de
used
elementos
to just
intermedios.
deal with conflicts on the battlefield or with diplomacy. Or now we're looking at sanctions, and now we're looking at cyberspace. The case of Iran is key. There's a lot of dynamics that are working in that regard, and there's the problems with China. In the year 2000, we started realizing that there's disinformation, energy grids, and here
tendemos muchas veces a decir cosas que como de pasado,
we have a great tendency to look at things supposedly in the future, but really they're from the past. We've seen these already. And there are studies on this, degree programs in universities
criminología contra la social,
combining
por ejemplo,
sociology
otras
and
universidades que
other
tienen
technical
criminología con
areas,
ciber. Me parece fundamental. Entonces, por eso que
criminology
hemos
with
comentado aquí, lo que hemos puesto sobre la mesa, lo de que ya no tenemos atracadores en los bancos porque
cybernetics.
no hace falta que salgan de casa, pues hay que equilibrar esa
You have
formación, ¿no?
to
Y se está acercando
balance
al
the training
50%
that's
de
received.
delito físico, 50% de delito ciber.
We have
Por
to,
ejemplo, crimi con
for
ciber me parece
example,
una combinación muy buena. Y sin otra cosa que estoy aconsejando, bueno,
there's a very good
derecho,
combination
por supuesto,
involved.
ya es una posición, ya es un
And
trabajo,
there's
simplemente
a
por los temas de
position,
protección de datos.
work at protection
En
of
este
data
avance
protection,
tecnológico,
and
tan
with
positivo
this
en muchas cosas, pero va tan
technological
deprisa, va mucho por
advancements,
delante del cambio
it's
social.
going so
La
fast,
tecnología se
ahead
genera
of
y se
social
utiliza
change.
antes de lo que
Technology
hemos sido,
is
nos hemos preparado para poder
being
utilizar como
generated
ciudadanos.
before we're
Vamos a tener que ir
really
acompañados siempre
prepared as
a la
citizens
derecha con un abogado y a la
to
izquierda
use
con una
it.
persona
So
experta en
we're
ética
always going to have to
para
be
poder andar por este
having
mundo.
people who are
Entonces, sí, esas
knowledgeable in
combinaciones
the
son
technical
muy
areas
interesantes
and
y
also
alumnos que tengo
in things like
sobre
law.
internacional, cuando me dicen, ¿cómo sigo? ¿Por dónde tiro? ¿Qué estudio ahora?
And people
Digo dos
ask,
cosas,
what do I do
ciber
now?
o data science,
What do I study
todo
now?
vinculado a datos. Son
Cyber
las dos vías
or
de
data
complementar
protection, or these are
pues muchas
ways
necesidades que
to
estamos teniendo a día de hoy en las empresas. Una
offset
persona que ha estudiado
certain
criminología que me
needs
dice,
they
voy a hacer
have
ahora
in
un máster en
companies.
yihadismo. Está muy bien, claro que es un
Some
gran
people say,
yihadismo,
well, if
pero
they're
va a
involved
ser
in
muy difícil que
criminology,
vayas a
I'm going to
trabajar
do a master's
analizando el
in
yihadismo.
jihadism,
Algo que trabajes
but
en el
maybe you should
lugar,
do it
en
in analysis
Entonces, o bien
means
combinando
for
grados, o bien
jihadism.
como formación complementaria en la que nos lancemos y que intentemos también llevarnos a la parte técnica a la gente
And there are a lot of
que no ha
things that
tenido
bring us into the technical area,
tanta
bring
incidencia de
people
esas
into
temáticas
technical
en
areas
su
that really
formación previa.
weren't focusing on that in the first place.
Muchísimas gracias. Pues Antonio, es tu turno y además
Thank
también te
you,
voy a pedir
Antonio.
que
It's
cierres
your
ya la sesión.
turn, and I'm
Bueno,
going to
pues yo
ask
creo
you
que
to
se ha
close
dicho,
the
sobre todo la
session.
primera pregunta,
I
yo creo que se ha
think
dicho casi
the
todo,
first
¿no?
question,
Es
I
clarísimo
think
que,
really everything has
cada
been
vez
said
más,
that is
además yo pongo el
necessary to
ejemplo que
say.
vamos cada vez a
I
un
will
mundo,
use
vamos a
the
lo que llamo mundo extendido
example.
digital, ¿no? Donde
We
parte
now have a
realmente
very
vamos a
extended
existir
digital
nosotros o
world.
van a existir nuestros bots, ¿no? Y por lo tanto, igual
Either
que las
we're going to
guerras antes
be
eran físicas,
existing
después
or
se
our
convertirán
bots
en
are going to be
virtuales, ¿no? Es decir, casi
existing.
todas las
So it's
interacciones,
becoming
buenas y
a
malas,
very
se van a
extensive
convertir,
world.
van a
All
pasar
the
en el
interactions
mundo
are
virtual,
going
¿no?
to
En ese sentido.
become,
Con lo
everything
cual,
seems to be becoming
claramente,
virtual.
además,
So
un dato que se muestra
clearly,
cada vez más es que las
one piece
economías,
of data
o
that
gran
shows
parte de la
this is
economía,
that part
se
of
caería en muchos países
economies
si
would
fallan
fall
muchas de
in
las
many
infraestructuras críticas, con lo cual la
countries
mejor
if
forma
a
de
lot
atacar a
of
alguien es
critical
sencillamente atacar su
infrastructures
infraestructura, ¿no?
were
Y con
to
eso
follow.
ya
So a way to
consigue que se
attack
bloqueen o el
is
sistema de
definitely
distribución
by
de agua
blocking
o el sistema energético o el que sea. Con lo cual,
going
claramente,
after
eso se está convirtiendo en un hecho ya
infrastructure. This is
y de hecho,
becoming,
bueno, como saben, varios países, entre
and
ellos
as you
España, ¿no? Ha
know,
creado
different
también
countries,
la unidad de la
including Spain,
ciberguerra, ¿no?
have
En ese
created
sentido,
the
porque ya y Estados Unidos tiene la quinta
cyber
fuerza, ¿no? Que es lo que le
war
llaman, ¿no? O la cuarta, que es
unit.
justamente dedicada solamente a la guerra en
This
el
would
mundo
be
virtual, ¿no? En ese sentido.
and
Y en cuanto finalmente con respecto a las carreras, totalmente
looking
de
at war
acuerdo con lo que he
only
dicho
in the
anteriormente. Es decir, cada vez más eso se está
environment,
convirtiendo en
and we're
en
seeing
la
this
necesidad de, como he dicho antes, de la
a need
multidisciplinaridad, ¿no? Y en ese sentido,
for
obviamente ahora es
multidisciplinarity.
mucho de carreras,
There are a
combinar
lot
carreras, ¿no? En
of
algunos casos
study
muy específicos, pero
programs to
incluso más,
combine
es decir, hay una
fields of
tendencia,
study,
es lo que se
and
llama
there's a
el modelo
trend
de las universidades europeas,
having
que se está planteando
the
un poco
European
ya los primeros
university
pilotos,
model,
y es el hecho de que
which
el estudiante sea capaz de
involves the
crearse
student
su
being
propio perfil,
able
es decir,
to
que al final
create their
lo
own
que se quiere
profile.
obtener es un conjunto de
So what
capacidades,
they're
de
looking
destrezas,
for a
y que esas
series
destrezas
of
se las puede obtener
skills,
de múltiples
and that
formas.
these skills
Que es un
can
poco lo que
be
decía José María, es decir, yo la puedo
acquired
conseguir porque he hecho una
one way or
asignatura muy
another way.
específica de una tecnología, o la puedo conseguir porque he hecho una
I
asignatura
can do it because I
que
did
me
a
lo
very
enseña desde la
specific
perspectiva del
subject
derecho,
matter,
¿no? Desde
or
la
I
sociología. Es decir, lo importante es la
did it
destreza que se
through
quiere adquirir, el saber responder a
another
esos
more
retos, a
general
esas necesidades, esas capacitaciones, ¿no? Y
area of
ese modelo
study.
yo creo que cada vez
And
más se va a
this
ir
model,
imponiendo,
I
porque al
think,
final lo
is
que le da
going
es la
to
libertad al
be
alumno
more
de
and
que
more
se
used
construya su
because
currículum.
we're
Sí, no existirán
enabling
carreras
students to
A, B,
to
C y D,
build their
sino que
own
existirá una
program.
mezcolanza, ¿no? Un tutti frutti, en cierta medida, que siempre y cuando obviamente se cumplan unos mínimos y haya un conjunto mínimo
provided
de
certain
capacidades
minimal
yo creo que esa tendencia es un poco de la línea de lo que estamos comentando.
covered.
Cada vez necesitamos más
So this is what we're working
esas diferentes perspectivas,
toward.
y además cada
The
uno,
needs are more and more
ustedes han estado en las carreras, cuando yo era
varied.
alumno, pues hay cosas que
When
te
I
gustan
was a
más y cosas
student,
que te
there were
gustan
things
menos, ¿no? Y
which
a
I
lo mejor
liked
te
more
gustaría que
and
algunas asignaturas te las
less.
diesen o fuese con otra
And you
perspectiva.
might,
Si tuviese esa posibilidad de encontrar
if
esa
you had the
asignatura que me enseña
possibility
lo
of
mismo, pero desde la otra perspectiva, a mí me haría feliz. El alumno
studying
al final,
a
pues,
subject
generaría
matter
mejores
that
profesionales también, ¿no?
you enjoyed,
Yo creo que esa
but
tendencia
also
va en
involved
esa
the
dirección.
skill
Y obviamente,
set that you
como bien
needed,
se ha dicho antes,
it would be
sobre todo, y eso
it would
me
be
gusta a mí
more
remarcar
student
sobre todo a los
friendly,
alumnos de informática,
obviously.
tenemos la suerte de estar
Especially
en una
computer
carrera, en
science
este caso, ¿no?
students are
que
lucky enough to
tiene
be
unas
in a
capacidades, primero,
program of study that
de
has
transformar en la sociedad muy
the
importante,
ability to
es ahora mismo
transform
pieza
society in a
central
major
de
way,
casi todo lo que es
and
este
this
proceso que
is,
estamos hablando de la
and
digitalización, ya
it's
que hoy estamos hablando de
basically
digitalización,
a
el proceso de
central
digitalización, ¿no?
point
La
of
ciberseguridad,
everything
como
else
habéis
that's
visto, pues,
going
es una de
on.
las patas, pero hay
Cybersecurity
otras
is
muchas
one of
patas, y
the
ahí vamos a
pillars,
estar, ¿no? Es decir,
but there are
es
many others.
donde tenemos donde podemos y
And
vamos
this is
a,
where
yo creo que a
we
generar estos nuevos profesionales que van a estar los mejores
need
adaptados
to be
para
generating these new
transformación de la educación.
professionals.
Y yo creo que con esto, si quieres,
And I think
Cristina, pues vamos a
Cristina
cerrar ya, porque ya
will
además no hay ninguna más pregunta, hemos
consider
pasado un rato.
this
Yo sobre
session
todo quiero agradecer
adjourned,
muchísimo en este caso
and
primero
I'd like
a
to
nuestros oyentes, ¿no? En este caso
our,
los que están directamente
listeners
con Zoom y los que he visto
and
que están también
viewers.
conectados a través de
I see that there are a lot
televisión de la Universidad de
connected
Murcia, en
through
este caso, que
the
como saben, estaba
University of
retransmitiendo en
Murcia
streaming.
television streaming.
Agradecer a nuestros ponentes,
And
porque
as
primero ha
like
sido
to
agradable
thank our
y
presenters.
además yo creo que muy complementarios y por lo tanto
I think
ha
we were
sido,
very
yo creo que muy
complementary.
para todos. Y por supuesto a nuestra encantadora,
We covered each one a different area of the same issue. And I'd like to thank S Global and the Embassy for the initiative of offering this activity, and we would like to continue in collaboration with you.
A los alumnos el que presenten sus proyectos.
Maybe you would want to remind the students to present their projects for the competition. I want to thank the three of you, José María, Antonio, and Michael.
Por supuesto a la universidad de nuevo y a la
I also want to thank the university, the embassy again, and invite you to participate in the competition and invite you to read our, or to subscribe to S Global. This week we published an article very related to what we're talking about, is how algorithms discriminate because of issues that you were discussing, because of the data and how the data are used, acquired. So, and how these algorithms are used for taking different decisions. So, I want to thank you all for your presence and your collaboration. I invite you to participate in the competition, and I just would remind you that you have the information on the competition on the S Global webpage.
Que corresponde al debate con la Universidad de Murcia, y ahí también colgaremos el vídeo. Si alguien luego quiere volver sobre lo que hemos hablado, ahí vais a tener toda la información. Muchísimas gracias y buenas tardes. Buenos días.
Thank you very much. And good morning, Michael, in the United States.
Muchísimas gracias. Placer.
Bye. See you.
Thank you.